Hey everyone, MutantCowboy here, and I want to welcome you to the first episode of what I'm calling Game Design versus Player Desire. Now, this is going to be a mini series, I guess you could call it, of issues that I think need to be identified in the game. And just to expand on what I mean by this, if you consider what goes into designing a game, you have, 3, 4, however many years to design a game, design the concept, design all the mechanics behind said game. And there's a famous military saying that, the best laid plans do not survive first contact with the enemy. And that simply means that no matter how much effort you put into something, it's highly likely that, you can't get everything right. Something will go wrong and you will have to fix it or change it. And in this case, the player base dictates a lot of what is wrong or what is right. However, players are not always the best source of feedback, or at least unbiased feedback. When you look at what a player is trying to achieve, generally, they are talking about things that affect them personally, and they are trying to get bonuses for the things that they want, for how they want to play, and they're trying to generally detract from what other people are building or from what other people are using. In the case of DPS players versus skill build players, or PvPers versus PvEers. But to be honest, you can't nitpick individual pieces of a game, this tiny stat or this tiny thing or this weapon or this skill. You generally cannot nitpick like that and expect to actually have a full balanced game just because you changed one thing. And this is exactly what happens. It's like a house of cards. When you remove one card, you could end up collapsing the entire deck. If you have a trail of dominoes and you knock over something in the middle, everything that comes after that could possibly be knocked down. And this is one of the biggest problems with the Division. And if you do critically think about the Division, you probably have some idea about what kind of things go wrong in the game. But I want to pick a topic that's, pretty simple to understand. And I want to pick a topic that, most people probably don't even really think creates a balance problem. And that's why I want to use it. I want to use this topic. I want to use this specific point because it underlies the entire foundation of what can go wrong for a game. Now, I'm going to use Division 1 as an example. And I'm going to do this for two reasons. First reason being, a lot of people think I'm just a fanboy for Division 1, and no matter what Division 2 does, I'm not going to like it. So I specifically want to use Division 1 to show you a huge problem that I had with some of the balance changes in it, to prove that I did not like everything about Division 1, especially some of the balancing changes that they made. The second reason being that I want to pick something that we can actually look at the entire history of. I want to look at what they did to it, and I want to look at how that progressed throughout all the additional changes to the game and see what the final result of it was at the end of the game's life. As many of you guys know who actually played the game, Division 1 had a rather big issue, at least on some degree, about bullet sponginess. And obviously we see it in Division 2 still. But in Division 1, when they released the first incursion, the difficulty scaling was just awful. And it compounded itself when they released Underground and, new difficulty tiers. All these issues just compounded to make bullet sponginess a real severe issue in the game. Now, what they did to combat this was a two-part maneuver. In Update 1.4, they ended up reducing the time to kill of the NPCs. They also increased the ammo capacity of the player. Part of the problem was that people were just running out of ammo when they were fighting these super tanky enemies. And, you would have to use all of your ammo just to clear a single room in the underground. But of course, they also reduced the tankiness of the enemies, so they basically double dipped on that topic. Ammo capacity may not seem like a harmful topic. Ammo capacity may seem, completely benign. What possible problem could ammo capacity have in this game? Well, like I said, it's a snowball effect. When you change something, you have the possibility of completely changing a meta, completely changing what people use. Basically, you have the possibility to just make things completely obsolete. Before 1.4, Lone Star was a very valuable gear set to be using because it gave you 100% ammo capacity. And you know what? If you needed that ammo, if you were using these fast RPM weapons, Lone Star having a two-piece for that was definitely part of the meta, and it was viable because you needed ammo capacity. But because of them giving out ammo capacity to everyone, it basically reduced the need to actually use Lone Star. So in many ways, because of this buff, Lone Star fell out of use on a majority of the content in the game. And this problem extends into talents like Police Up, which whenever you killed a hostile with a skill, you had a 10% chance of auto-refilling all ammo types to capacity. There was also Repo Reaper, which whenever you killed a hostile with a sidearm, you received 30 rounds for your primary weapon. And another one was One is None, which whenever you shot a hostile in the head, you had a 50% chance of actually not consuming that bullet. Now these talents didn't actually become completely useless because of the ammo buff, but they did fall heavily out of disuse, and there was no further encouragement for people to actually consider investing in them. And this also had an effect on skills themselves. The ammo cache for the support station largely fell out of disuse at this time because you didn't need the ammo anymore. You did not need to worry about constantly supplying your ammo for most encounters because you already had enough to clear the room and then make it to the next ammo stash. And I mean, there were already plenty of ammo, resupplies in the game. I mean, after every engagement, there was an ammo cache, so you could constantly refill your ammo. There was no need to conserve this stuff. And by giving players even more ammo, you didn't need it during an encounter. You didn't need to conserve your ammo. You could just blind fire at everything. You could just waste ammo missing shots, and it didn't matter. You weren't punished anymore because you didn't need to worry about your ammo. And this caused a huge effect in, what weapons people used. And two weapon-related examples that can be taken from this. I personally used low RPM weapons for the majority of my playtime. I preferred higher damage per bullet rather than higher RPM weapons. And this was something I largely developed during my initial playthrough of Division 1 because ammo was scarce. Ammo was not a resource to be wasted because you didn't want to run out. So I stuck with, slow firing LMGs and, AKs. Basically just conserving that ammo as best I could and getting as much value per bullet as I possibly could. And the other impact this had on my weapon use was pretty much at all times I made sure I had an LMG, an AR, an SMG, a marksman rifle, a pistol, a shotgun. I made sure my stuff was good just in case I needed to switch it out during a fight because I ran out of ammo for my LMG or I ran out of ammo for my assault rifle and I needed to use a backup. So I had them. And, this goes for PvE, this goes for PvP. There were times when I was manhunt and I needed to switch out my weapons because my ammo just would not get me through another fight if I, couldn't get away. So I would have to duck behind something while somebody was covering my back and switch out the weapons. And that was enjoyable. It was fun. It was kind of, it was like a high threat moment where it's like, crap, I got to do this as fast as I can. But because of the ammo increase, this tactic largely didn't matter anymore. Because they increased the drop rate of ammo on players that you killed, rogues could easily resupply most of their ammo pretty much all the time. There was no real hindrance to just staying rogue, running around, killing people willy-nilly. You didn't need to escape, and you didn't really have to worry about ammo-generating abilities to, keep you going. Because you didn't need to worry about having a high RPM weapon, because you didn't need to worry about, making sure your shots hit, you could just obviously have enough ammo for pretty much a 30-minute rogue fest. You could have enough ammo for an hour because of all the resupplying you could get from dead bodies. What this ultimately did was remove a lot of the personal preference choice and instill a this is best in slot meta all the time no matter what. Now if you were part of the Division 1, you know how this weapon basically just filled in all the right spots for every build no matter what. It was overpowered for anything. It didn't matter what build you were using. The house was probably the best weapon or the best secondary that you could have on your build. Now you may be wondering, well, what does that have to do with ammo capacity? Because you no longer needed to actually switch your weapons out. You could run through PvP and use this weapon and only this weapon and never really have to worry about running out of ammo. By giving players easy ammo, what they really did was they took away the pros and cons of a build. The pros and cons of having a high RPM weapon should be that you do more damage, but you also run out of ammo a lot quicker. But if you take that away and basically raise ammo to a level that is almost redundant, that is basically just so overstuffed that it doesn't matter anymore, then you basically make weapon choice moot. It is pointless because you don't need to have a worry about what weapon you're using. There's no point in having a low RPM weapon to conserve ammo if you don't need to conserve ammo. There is no value over a higher sustained damage weapon over a higher burst damage weapon. Burst damage will always win, especially in PvP. But the goal of balance should be that there is a substantial decision to be made when you choose your weapon. It should not be an easy calculation that this is just the best weapon in the game and that's it, and it doesn't matter how I play. It's just the best. That shouldn't happen. The goal of balancing should be to make sure that there is a substantial negative for using this weapon. And that negative should be that you are burning through ammo so fast that you just, don't want to waste your shots. But if the game allows you to waste 75% of your bullets and not even really fear running out of ammo, that is an issue. Now, the reason I call this game design versus player desire is because it's obvious that in an attempt to kind of balance the different weapons, low ammo capacity goes into that. Low ammo capacity ensures that just because a high RPM weapon does more damage in the short term, that you are still rewarded for having a low RPM weapon doing more damage in the long term. But because players refuse to accept this type of in-game balancing, they ended up ruining the balance of the game in the future. And we see this happening in Division 2. We see a lot of things that basically ruin the balance of Division 2 currently that happened before. And, this covers skills, this covers weapons, this covers gear, it covers pretty much everything in the game. And one of the first examples that I can point out to you in this game was the reception of the negatives on weapon mods. Personally, I like the negatives on weapon mods because if you were part of Division 1, you knew that, there was only certain weapon mods that you would use. And it was so annoying that there was no real reason to use any of the other ones. And you can see that now in the current form of Division 2. I don't know how many players do not use the 20 round magazine for their AR. I mean, there's no real reason to use any magazine besides that one. There's no real reason to use some of these items. And for the majority of the player base, I am willing to bet that there's only like one or two that you actually use on any build. It doesn't matter. You're either using some form of crit or maybe some form of stability. And that's pretty much it. What they tried to do with negatives was to try to rein that in. They wanted people to actually see different benefits from all sorts of different stats. And they wanted people to choose stability. They wanted people to choose rounds. They wanted people to choose crit. But they also wanted to give it a negative that might not make it the best slot for every situation. They wanted to make it so it was an actual direct choice by the player which mod they used for what type of content or for which section of a mission they used, whatever. But because of the backlash, they pretty much reverted it to a very basic system without any real negatives. And of course, now we see that players use pretty much the exact same mods on pretty much everything. Doesn't matter what your build is. Everything in this game has some relation to something else. If you knock out thing A and create thing B, then you're going to have to go back and change thing B. If thing B changes and then C, D, and E get affected, well, now you have to go and fix C, D, and E. And you have to hope that the developer is willing to fix C, D, and E. Because if they only fix C, then you still have D and E. So you have this chain that keeps getting mended in part of it and then keeps breaking in other parts, and they just have to keep going and fixing this stuff and constantly changing it. So if this thing that gets fixed has a huge relationship with everything else in the game, you are going to encounter balance problems. Now, I'm not saying that people shouldn't express their opinions on certain things. If you do have an opinion about something, consider how everything else in the game is affected by that single thing. If it is a talent, consider what other talents are affected by it. Consider what other weapons are affected by it. Consider if this has a resounding benefit towards this and a resounding negative towards this. Because if it does end up killing something, well, that doesn't help the game. If it ruins a lot of the gameplay, then that's not helping the game. Feedback should be about making the game better. It should not be about your personal desire to play like this and only like this. And while some people may disagree and think that their opinion matters and they don't care about anyone else's, well, what happens when you've got 50 different opinions and everyone doesn't care about what you think? What happens when their opinion changes the stuff that you like? What happens when their opinion changes the builds that you want to use in a very negative way and you no longer want to use them? But that'll do it for me, guys. That'll do it for this first episode of Game Design versus Player Desire. But thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.